Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer who is passionate about helping all of us to use the adversity in our lives to grow and show up as the best version of ourselves. Over to you, Aaron.
You keep doing that. No, so we have a trauma psychotherapist on the program today. Viewers and listeners may know her from 90 Day, The Last Resort, Janie Lacy, Dr. Janie Lacy, talking about, all kinds of toxic relationships, how to heal from divorce, all kinds of things. But the 90-day part, I'm stuck on that because I'm curious, how long were you and Jeff engaged prior to getting married?
So he proposed to me in August and we got married in April.
Okay. And that was that by design? Like, okay, when you talk in August, you're like, okay, I'm gonna let's get married now. We know what we want.
So I told him, I go, whatever you do, once I get into law school, do not propose to me. Okay. So what does he do on my third day of law school? He proposes. But because I told him I will not say yes. If you propose to me when I'm in law school, I will not say yes. Apparently, I didn't keep that promise to myself. I did say yes, and I think actually the date of April 3rd, at the time, he was a hotshot fireman, so like fire season started soon after. It all had to do with like his work schedule, my school schedule, and we also, we had a really big wedding. And so actually looking back, I don't even know how we planned it.
I was going to ask, how did you throw that together?
I don't even know. My parents, I guess.
Well, he's a hotshot.
Yes. In so many ways. How, tell me about your, have you.
I was going to cut it right there.
Do you want to cut it or should we keep talking?
We can cut it right there. I think that's good. Okay. I think that'll work.
Cut.
We don't need to talk about how I was a 10-day fiance.
Yeah, I know. I want to hear about the 10-day fiance.
We are here today with Dr. Janie Lacy, a trauma psychotherapist and relationship expert. She also stars in 90 Day, The Last Resort on TLC. Dr. Lacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Holly.
Yes. So I was actually just talking to Aaron off camera and I was saying, I don't think that I've ever actually been in a toxic relationship, but maybe I have and I don't even know about it. So tell us, what is a toxic relationship? How do you know if you're in one?
Well, I like to look at toxic relationships. Most people don't realize they're in it until they realize they can't get out of it. But if we look at it and we just break it down in very simple terms, right? We're going to have a lot of criticism in the relationship. There's going to be a lot of control and there's competition, right? So I like to break it down into the 3 C's so it's easy to remember. So you feel like there's a lot of control back and forth and there's constant criticism. You never feel like you can be good enough. And then you'll see like there's sometimes this one-up, there's this competition that happens in the context of the relationship. But we also can look at some of the more obvious signs, right? There's emotional abuse, there's physical abuse, right? Some of those more obvious signs, but the less obvious signs would be those three C's, because a lot of people can make excuses for that behavior when it shows up in their relationship.
Yeah. As a divorce lawyer, I do bear witness to a lot of toxic relationships. But I just wasn't sure, like maybe when you're in it, you don't know. But okay, based on your definition, I think I'm good. But does a toxic relationship happen because one or both people in it are toxic, or is it just like the chemistry together that makes it toxic?
Well, it's not as simple as that, but if we wanted to break it down into categories, right? So you'll have one is we are good as the parts of any relationship, right? So the relationship is going to be as good as the individuals. So if there's one or both of the individuals who have toxic traits, most of the time it's in their blind spots because they were that way before you've met them. Or, we look at something that we call those from a mental health perspective, we have narcissistic personality disorder, and then we have those that have high narcissistic traits. So when we're looking at those categories, there's usually potentially someone that is preyed upon. And that's usually what we'll just use it for the term of our conversation, the victim. That victim usually has traits that from society's standpoint look like good traits. I'll just use some typical heterosexual language. She's typically someone who's agreeable. She has high empathy. She avoids conflict, right? So there's a personality type that will prey on that type of person because they'll get what we call supply from them. So in that case, it's not necessarily that she in of itself is toxic, but she can have these traits that can make her more vulnerable to toxic type of people in particular. And we look at those from a society as being good traits, that you have high empathy, you're very compassionate, you want everyone to get along. But from a relationship standpoint, that can be a very vulnerable position if the person you're with is looking to exploit those. And that person who's looking to exploit those behaviors or those characteristics, they're usually not doing it from an intentional standpoint. There could be some times where they're intentional, but that's also part of their toxic personalities. They're walking around in denial that they potentially may be predatory and looking for certain types of people that they can exploit or take advantage of.
Okay. Now, I would imagine, I mean, I know, but I'll just ask you because you're the expert. Healing from a toxic relationship. Well, actually, I don't really know. So let's see what you have to say. Is healing from a toxic relationship harder than healing from a not toxic relationship?
The quick answer would be yes, right? So a non-toxic relationship, in a very basic sense, you're going to be sad. You're going to be like, oh, that sucked. I wanted to be in that relationship. I really like these things about him. You're going to go through a normal grief cycle, right? You'll maybe even have some, what we call the bargaining. Well, maybe if I would have done this, the relationship could have worked out, but you're going to eventually get to a place of acceptance and you will move on. Where when we're looking at a toxic relationship in particular, there's another term I'll just use. You probably have heard it. We see it all over TikTok and all the places. But trauma bond can normally occur in the context of a toxic relationship. And it's from its basic definition, it's pretty much you're trying to get the person who's hurting you the most to love you. And just like when people go to, let's say Las Vegas, and they're doing those slot machines, there's something called intermittent reinforcement. So in that, you're waiting for that anticipation of maybe when I pull the slot machine down next time, I'm going to get those lucky sevens. Yeah. The same thing happens in the context of a toxic relationship. You're trying to get back to this moment and you're thinking, well, maybe if I show up, or maybe if I do this, or maybe this, then he will. And you're constantly waiting for that moment, the breadcrumb. You're waiting for that moment of the affection. You're waiting for that moment of attachment. That is a lot harder to leave when you have that type of, come here, I love you, I hate you, I can't live with you, but I can't live without you. When you have that type of connection, that is a lot harder to leave the relationship, one, which we know from women in particular. I work with a lot of women. It works both ways, but I tend to focus more on women. 8 to 12 times it'll take a woman to leave a toxic relationship. That's where you'll see, maybe it's not you, but maybe most of us will have friends, right? Well, why does she keep going back to him? Or, you know what, they just seem so toxic. He doesn't treat her well, but she keeps going back, right? When we judge those relationships, there's a lot of times there's a dynamic that's happening in the relationship that keeps her stuck, which is why I always say, you know, don't judge people until you really know what's going on in the relationship and being in their shoes. But from a normative standpoint, people break up all the time. And if they don't have some of these high level toxic traits, you'll be sad, you'll have some moments of grief, you'll have a season of grief, but you'll bounce back and you'll continue to move forward. Where the other, they're going to have a lot of healing to do, because if not, then they're going to bring that stuff right into their next relationship. So perhaps if she's experienced betrayal trauma, her next relationship, she's going to be hyper vigilant. She's going to be looking every time he puts his phone down, facing down. She's going to have internal PTSD and thinks, well, what is he trying to hide? Or did he look at the waitress a certain way, right? You start projecting your pain that has yet to be healed onto your current relationship.
So I'm a divorce lawyer, and what happens a lot in our firm is people will come in, they'll sit down for a consultation, they'll tell us all the things that, you know, from an objective outsider looking in, this looks like a really terrible relationship. This is probably a toxic relationship. like, how could anybody be, continuing on living this way type of thing. And then they'll leave our office and they'll remain in the relationship. And sometimes they'll come back a couple times or call, and then it's like, no, I'm not ready yet. So looking at it from like a divorce lawyer's perspective of trying to help somebody, but also you mentioned like we all have these friends, right, that are in these relationships. Is there anything anyone on the outside can do or should do to help somebody in that situation? Or is this just a situation where it's like they have to come to this on their own?
Yes, there's a lot of things that you can do to be a support system, to be someone that's trusted. And when they do hit rock bottom or they have those moments, they can call you because you are going to hold space for them. But a lot of times people will put themselves in other people's position. Well, if this was me, this is what I would do.
Right.
And then they start feeling judged by you, and then they start moving farther away. Then they don't tell you when they really need you. So some things someone can do, if you do know a friend that's in a toxic relationship and she keeps going back and forth, or he could go either way, is to not judge them, to not criticize them, and to not tell them what they should do, and to not demean their partner, to be completely supportive of her, be supportive of your friend, and making comments to her. You know what? You are such a beautiful woman. You have achieved so much in your life, right? Just being able to build her up without tearing the other down, making yourself available, do a lot of fun things with her. And just letting her know that you're a safe space. So if she does call you, let's say she's giving you that 2 a.m. call, I can't believe he did this, blah, blah, blah. You can go pick her up and nobody knows except you and her, right? That's a trusted, safe space. But that means you also have to not project what you would do onto that person, because a lot of times people feel like, I don't want to keep talking to my friend about our relationship because she's going to get tired of hearing about it. So don't send that type of message. I mean, true friendship means that you're going to go for the long haul. So if your friend is going through the swamp, and you can see that she's going through the swamp, it doesn't mean that necessarily you pointing out that she's going to the swamp is all of a sudden going to wake her up and say, hey, I'm going in the swamp.
Right.
But the way that you can help her is show that she is lovable, that she is worthy, that you care about her, that you're supportive, that you are a person of integrity, that you're going to be patient with her. Those are the people who really can be helpful to those that are in toxic relationship versus isolating her, criticizing her. Because sometimes people think they're criticizing and they're pointing out all the bad stuff, or they're pointing, oh, you deserve more. Yes, that's true, but sometimes that can make her feel shame. And when someone feels the shame, that means they're going to go in isolation, they're going to hide, and they're not going to share with people what's going on because they feel like there's something wrong with me, which is very different than guilt, which means I've done something wrong. If they feel shame, they're going to feel like there's something inherently wrong with them. And working with a lot of high achievers in the celebrity space or just C-suite space, that happens all the time, because by society's standard, they're on television, they're, making the 6 and 7 figures, they're killing it at their career game. So they're going to have a lot more shame to be able to say, you know what, but I'm dealing with this loser. He calls me out of my name. He's cheated on me multiple times. So people are going to look at me like, well, what are you doing? You can do it. And then she feels more shame, and then she hides it. And so those that have the friendships around them that are encouraging, that are loving, supportive, that stay away from criticism and telling her what she needs to do, or even give unsolicited advice, but it's just there as a solid friend, do things that are fun with her, talk about other things like the weather, whatever that may be. But to let her know that she's not alone by your presence, which can be the present.
Yes. Okay. So I know you have this book, How to Heal from a Toxic Relationship. So how does one heal from a toxic relationship?
So I look at it as it's multi-layered, but I look at it from 3 pillars. And when in the programs that we do, we know the 3 pillars work, right? So the first pillar is really looking at your mindset. We have to really look at what we believe and what we think about ourselves based off of what has happened to us. So I kind of look at it as a tree, that what people see are like the leaves of the tree, the bark is like our self-esteem, but those roots is our belief system, our self-belief. And that's not what people see. you can walk around, you could be the most gorgeous or the handsome guy that has everything, but your roots can be rotten in the sense of what you really think about yourself. So we have to bring up things that are in the unconscious mind to the conscious mind, and we have to integrate them. And so that you really walk, that's your self-worth, pretty much is what I'm saying. So we really have to really look at your self-worth, which no one can see, but that's tied to our mindset. And then the second pillar is our inner work. Our inner work is we all have if we're walking on this earth, Holly, we all have wounds. We've all been hurt.
Yes.
Our parents
Yes.
may not have shown up the way that we needed them to show up. So we have to look at all of those things, through a life map. We have to look at our pain points, what we needed but we didn't get, which is emotional neglect. Because some people say, "Oh, my parents were there. I didn't have
Yeah.
anything bad happen in my childhood," but you didn't have the good stuff either. The good stuff is the things that we need to be made full, to be full of the good enough stuff, so that we are secure people. So we
Yeah.
do the inner work by looking at our childhood, by looking at our relationships. Like if we were to line up all of the, for all the listeners, if you line up all the people that you've dated and you put them at that Thanksgiving table, it's going to tell me something about you more than about them,
Oh,
right? So we have to
yeah.
look at all of your relationships, your parents,
Interesting.
your friendships, and we look at the patterns versus the problems. We all have problems in relationships, but if there's patterns, then that means there's some inner work that needs to be dealt with. And then the third pillar is the body work. The body keeps the score, in the sense that trauma, anxiety, stress, all of that is tied to our physical health. And if we
Yeah.
have undealt with trauma in our life, it can show up as cancer, migraines,
Right.
digestive issues, all of these types of things. So we have to get all three of those pillars lined up and start working over a course of period of time. So the way that we do that is you have to have rinse and repeat of the good stuff along with positive emotion. That's how really you kind of rework things. So we kill the old synapses, which is the negative feelings, the triggers, all these other things, by bringing above the consciousness. And then you're creating new synapses of your brain by having positive emotion and doing the right things over and over and over and over again. So I'm making it very simple, but that's the three pillars of healing, that when women get through those over a course of time, 2 to 5 years of hard work, I mean, you
Yeah.
really can change the rest of your life and break patterns.
Wow. 2 to 5 years of hard work. That seems like a long time. I mean, it's short in the scheme of things, but that does seem like a long time. I
Right.
know you do. I know you do some work on how to find love after divorce, correct?
Yes. Hmm.
So
And
how
that's
do
part of
you?
that.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. That is like, I'm sure there's some work and some healing that has to be done after a divorce, whether it was a toxic relationship or not. So tell us a little bit more about that work and about how, what people can do to ensure that they can find love and healthy love after divorce.
Well, they absolutely can, but it does take some time because you want to show up as a very different person. So when I'm looking at that 2 to 5 years, that means you are being very conscious and deliberate and intentional about all pillars of your life and making decisions with accountability. We know, especially with women who have accountability, meaning that they have other people around them who are trusted and they have a good community that they can check in with and have accountability, that they get to the other side. But that 2 to 5 years, just think about our patterns, especially the older we are, the patterns to get to that toxic place that say, now, you know what, I want to do something different, didn't happen overnight. But what people will say, or what the concern, I should say, Holly, that happens with that 2 to 5 years, well, does that mean I can't date? No, that does not mean you
Right.
can't date. What that means is that I do think you need to have a period of time to really be able to focus on you without any distractions. And distractions could be the relationships. And I don't give anyone a timetable, but I do say a period of time. But if I had to give someone a timetable, I would say 6 months to a year minimal, where you are
Okay.
being intentional about your work and you're really figuring out who you are. Because in
Yeah.
toxic relationships, you abandon yourself. So let's say he likes football. Next thing you know, you're in a jersey, you're rah rah. You completely become who they want you to be
Right.
versus really having your own autonomy, because that's what we look at performance-based love. So if you think, if I'm performance, I'm cooking, I'm sexing, I'm cooking, I'm being everything he wants me to be, so he'll never leave me. That's from an abandonment wound, because you try to be perfect in a relationship because you think that's going to secure them for not leaving. So
Right.
when that happens, we need to have accountability when someone enters back into relationship. And when you enter back in relationship, having that period where you've became, I always say get a PhD in your own history, right? We all get PhDs and,
Yeah.
JDs in other people's
Yeah.
school, but let's get it in our own school and understand ourself. Why do we do the things that we do?
Yes.
Our belief system, so that when you're now back into a relationship, you're going to attract a whole different man, for example, right? Because now you're
Yeah.
showing up with self-worth, self-confidence. You know who you are. When any types of red flags show up, you're not going to negotiate them and make them a scarf, right? You're going to exit left and say, this relationship is probably not something that's going to work for me. So
Right.
when they're entering back into dating and really, really ready to find that new love, having accountability, they now understand why they were even potentially a victim if they were in a narcissistic relationship, or their own toxic traits,
Yeah.
because that's something that they have to understand. Do they cut people off? Do they stonewall? So when they get to that place and they start dating smart, then they will marry smart. And when we marry smart, then we have smart families, right? And our children will be
Ooh.
products of that. So it all starts
Yes.
with, right? And you've probably heard this term. I know I've heard it many times, Holly. That one of the most important decisions we ever make is who we do life with and who we marry, right? It will dictate
Absolutely.
a lot of different things. And it's so true.
It is so true. Yes, absolutely. Wow. Okay. That's a lot of really great information and it makes so much sense. Talking about your role on the show, 90 Day, The Last Resort. So full disclosure, I haven't watched that show, but I hear this is like people making a last ditch effort to save their engagement. Is that correct?
Yes, so the last resort are the couples who have been on the 90-day series franchise they have multiple franchises. So they come to the last resort because it's their last ditch effort to save their relationship.
Okay. And so how do you tell us a little bit about that? Like, how do you counsel them? What are some of the tips and tricks as a last ditch effort to save a relationship? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what we did on the show is what we do if you're not on the show when it comes to couples. So we met with them individually, and we really understand like who they are as a person, but we also hear what their main complaints are in the relationship. And we also are taking a measurement of their own self-awareness of how much they contribute to the toxicity of the relationship. And then we bring them together and specifically in the last resort, we brought them to different obstacles, courses. We did a lot of different things to see how they, in real time, how they communicate, what are some of their weaknesses. And then we would review that with them. So to help them bridge their blind spots. So when it comes to couples in general, the first thing we have to do is we have to understand, again, we are as good as our parts. So we have to understand the parts of the relationship and who is really responsible for what. Because in relationships, there is responsibility to be had. So if there's someone who is maybe not openly, that's emotionally unavailable, there's something that we all should be aware of, and that's our attachment style. So someone has an anxious attachment style, so to speak, and someone's an avoidant, that's going to set up a certain dynamic. So with the last resort, some of the couples, we would see some of that attachment style where someone is closed off, they're shut off because subconsciously, perhaps maybe he had a mother who was overbearing, and now he's in a relationship, and when she gets too close, it feels smothering to him, so he shuts down. But her trauma is abandonment issues because she had an emotionally available mother and father. So when someone shuts down in a relationship, she clings on even harder. She's pursuing, she's anxious, she's toxic fighting, right? So we're looking at the dynamics of each couple, and then we help them do reparative work. Because, the truth is, Holly, as I mentioned, everyone has problems.
Yes.
But it's a matter in the relationship, do they both want to grow through it? Do they have a growth mindset?
Right.
And in the last resort, as well as couples that we work with in our practice, if there's one person who does not have a growth mindset, we know pretty much, I always give myself a little bit of a margin, but with 98% accuracy, that relationship will not last.
Yeah.
Because if someone is at this place and they have a limited thinking and they have a fixed mindset, this is the way that I am, I'm not going to change, and they have some of that type of dialogue, and the other person says, well, kind of like the giraffe and the turtle. He's only seeing, or let's change it. She's only seeing what's right in front of her, the turtle, and he's a giraffe. Well, there's so much more. There's a horizon. We can grow. We can be so much better. And she's like fighting for him to see that. That cycle right there we see over and over and over again, and we know that it's going to end unless they both have a growth mindset. And even if they're blaming each other, but if they both want to grow and they want to move beyond it, they have a high probability to move. So we're looking for that. We look for that in the last resort. We look for that in our couples, and then we start helping them have reparative work. Because Holly, I don't know if you ever heard this statistic, but it's pretty shocking when I tell people. But think about your own relationship. 69% of arguments in relationships are unresolvable. But those are the things that people cling to, right? Because
oh my God, that's so depressing. What?
But the key there is how they settle on that. Right. Yeah. So if you are, let's use a very superficial example. You're a morning person. He's an evening person.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to get him to be a morning person because you want him to take those daily walks with you. But he likes to stay up late and watch movies and relax because that's when he thinks. Right. You're not going to necessarily resolve that. Right. You can compromise and you can do some things, but you're looking at things totally different. So people have all of that in their relationship, which is not going to change and is not going to be resolvable. But what healthy couples do is they compromise when they still have their autonomy. They're interdependent. I can still be independent. I can still be dependent on you. Where in toxic relationships, I'm trying to get you to be that evening person until you and you're constantly fighting about that, right?
Yes.
And that's where we see it become unresolvable. But toxic relationships focus on those things that are unresolvable, and they go round and round and round, where healthy people can say, you know what? If you come with me on a walk, let's say 2 days a week, I'm good. The rest of the days, I'll just go by myself, right? So you settle and you have compromise without asking the other person to lose themselves. In toxic relationships, you lose yourself when you compromise.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Wow. I have not heard that statistic, but it makes a lot of sense. And
from the Gottman Institute.
Yeah, and I'm like, thinking of my mom. My parents have been married. I love my parents. They're amazing. They've been married, I think, 52 years now. But I still tell my Mom, you're still upset about the same stuff like 52 years into this marriage about my dad. Maybe it's time to accept it. So I could see that. Okay, so I was going to ask you the question, like, is there actually, do you see some couples that you think are just doomed? But I think you answered that. And because it's all about the growth mindset. If you have a person that has a fixed mindset that's not willing to want to improve and grow, I think you're saying that's a huge problem.
There are many couples today, Holly, and maybe you even know of some of them, that stay together and you can look at them and you're like, you guys should have gotten a divorce 20 years ago.
True.
But they stay together because whether it's religious reasons or just a traditional mindset that, death do us part, so to speak, even though it's killing me emotionally. Death is internal, but they learn to be separate. So I don't look at people as far as how long they've been together as that being a thing to celebrate. It's how satisfied are you in that relationship? I mean, really, when you kind of peel back the layers, are the two people in that 40-year, 50-year, 30-year, 20-year relationship really satisfied? So I first want to say, when I look at people that have a fixed mindset, it's people that's also been married. They just learn to tolerate each other because of their potentially legalistic beliefs or whatever their belief systems are. So I do want to say that, because some people will say, well, people that are married, well, obviously they'll put that on a pedestal, but I also understand that people stay in abusive relationships and don't divorce. But if we look at the fixed mindset over here, when people are coming in and that they don't have any of those hangups as far as maybe religion or tradition, then we can tell that even though that they're in therapy, about a couple years, they may spin the block with each other a few more times, but we can predict without a doubt that once the one person who's fighting the most and who's most invested in changing the relationship gets tired, so to speak, and let's say she turns off or he turns off, then it's hard to turn the light switch back on, and that's usually when they leave the relationship, or they have affairs, or they get their needs met outside the relationship, which is probably why they come see you. But that's completely from a dysfunctional standpoint, but that will lead them to now they're getting a divorce because of the affair versus our dysfunctional relationship, which made someone make a bad decision on how to handle that in the relationship.
Right. Wow. Well, this has been very enlightening. I know you have a hard out here in just about 1 minute. But thank you so much for being on the show and for, sharing all of your wisdom and expertise with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Holly.
I've got just a little bit more to say. We all have problems. Everyone has problems. Every relationship has problems. There's nothing that is perfect. But the key is, just like Dr. Lacy said, is do you want to grow through it? And if you're watching this show or listening to this show, I know you have a growth mindset and I know you want to do the work because we talk about it every single week. And I know you will do it because you were made for more.